the dinner check's on its way. The waiter's bringing it across the room right now.
Yeah.
And it's, I think,
what a good way to put that.
the end of 24, I think we're going to be standing around like who's American Express is going in for that one. Good afternoon. Welcome to the Northpoint of View. Dr. Walter Kemmsies. Walter, how are you?
I'm good, Mark. I'm, a little confused though. Got up this morning, as I always do, took my dog out early in the morning to relieve herself. And one of my neighbors had put their garbage can out. And that must mean it's Wednesday because the garbage guys come on Thursday. And so for the first 2 hours until I had my first Zoom, I thought today was Wednesday. And so I'm still trying to get my head back.
Are we getting ahead of ourselves?
Exactly. So otherwise I'm fine, but...
sort of an inauspicious way to start the podcast.
Exactly.
Well, what we have done, though, the last couple of weeks, 2023 recap.
Right.
I think you gave Jerome Powell somewhere between a D- and an F. 2024, we talked about the sort of the tension between the geopolitical realities of the world and sort of a bias toward maybe a strong economy in the U.S. Leading into an election. So all of that, and now 2024 and maybe beyond, some of the fundamental structural pieces that are in place or moving into place, and maybe some weaknesses in the overall structure.
Right.
Long term.
So let's just focus on the industrial policy, right? So there were there were two big bills passed in the last few years. One was the IIJA, which is the infrastructure investment and whatever, I can't remember it. We just call it IIJA, and I forgot. And then we have the Inflation Reduction Act, which had some stuff about reducing inflation, but it mostly had a lot of stuff about building electric vehicles.
Sure.
And somehow reducing inflation meant improving the environment. How that works, I'm not sure. I mean, the knee bone is connected to the shin bone, but I still struggle with that. Okay, I mean, I don't know what else is in that bill, but if you told me that there was a worse subsidy for ice cream trucks, I wouldn't be surprised.
I think there is.
There has to be. It's a cocktail of all kinds of stuff different politicians wanted. So, because otherwise you can't have a bipartisan supported bill.
Well, exactly. Exactly.
So, but this wasn't something that started under Biden. It was something that wasn't really started under Trump, but it was, definitely, I don't know how to put it, but Trump really blew it up when he announced the tariffs on on 75% of the goods imported from China. Some stuff we were critically dependent on, and it'd be stupid to put a tariff on it because we'd just be tariffing ourselves.
But you've talked about this. I mean, last year you've given us the history of tariffs going back to Reagan in the 80s and Japan.
Exactly.
And all of those things. So, I mean, this is something that's been sort of in the playbook for decades.
Right. But there's a difference between the 80s, 90s Japan and the 2020s China. China wants Taiwan back.
Yeah.
I don't know why. Maybe it's because it bifurcates the China Sea, and it's hard to militarily protect yourself if you've got some airspace that you can't really go through very safely.
And there's some, as you know, historical context there too.
Exactly.
It goes back a long way.
Right. So we have no judgment here. As an analyst, or as analysts, we don't. We look at the facts and we look at the consequences. And if you want to challenge the facts, or you think the facts shouldn't be those facts, that's not my problem. My problem is, what are the facts? So we're kind of going way off topic here. So let's go back to the key thing. And the U.S. realized that a lot of its supply chains, and I was an advisor to the Secretary of Commerce, and one of the guys who helped point out that we were extremely dependent on China for some things, like 95% dependent on China for our supply of active pharmaceutical ingredients. So that didn't make sense. And it wouldn't make sense if we were 95% dependent on India or,
Sure.
if we were, or any country.
Right.
There's no judgment on China. It's just that's stupid. And what happened during COVID proved exactly the point that you shouldn't be so dependent. China shut down exports of a lot of things, and especially in the medical area. And any country could have done that. I mean, it's you can sit there and say how evil, what terrible people. Oh, come on. You think Brazil would have, put us first over their own population?
And those are those flashpoints in time where just sort of the lights turn on in the room. I mean, you're sort of stumbling around in the dark and you're bumping into furniture. Somebody turns on the light and then it's visible.
Exactly.
We just need to make a change.
Yeah. So, Biden, as the transportation system got very badly jammed, Biden created a group of people or an agency kind of under the Department of Transportation to fix the logistics problems. And it's a Project Flow, Freight Logistics Optimization Works. Stupid name, but the government loves, good, acronyms. So there were some recent announcements about how we're improving that, but also in the same breath, the White House talked about repatriation of some of the supply chains, and so there's the press likes to paint everything as good guy versus bad guy, but what it really is stupid things versus smart things.
Yeah.
Right. So the Department of Defense for decades has had a list of essential industries. I know because I was on the governor's coronavirus task force in 2020, and we needed to know what really had to be protected. And my contribution was go to the DoD's website. They tell you what the essential industries are.
Right.
And those are the industries that have to have factories built here. Now, you and I, noticed that EV factory building is big, but let's remember that building medical supplies factories is also big. We see Eastman Chemicals created a new division called Eastman Pharmaceuticals. So they're getting into the business of producing the active ingredients.
Chips are huge right now, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Chips. So it's a range of industries, and if we start going into the list of that stuff, you're going to shut me down because it'll be not interesting. So we'll focus on the really big ones that account for a lot of the big numbers that we're seeing in the economy, I would say. Now, whether or not some of the investment we're making, for America's future makes sense or not, I think that's a whole different question.
I think I'm gonna go with smart things versus stupid things at some point. I don't know. We need a breakout session.
Exactly.
let's just make a list, right? But and time will tell. But we've been beating the drum pretty heavily this year on the issues with EV, right? I mean, it's just no secret. And I think maybe the last day or so. In the journal, there was an article on the top 20 EV companies and how many of them are, potentially going to run out of cash in 2024. I mean, that's I don't know if disaster is the right word, but I think we've got to somehow look at the realities of that.
Yeah. Look, let's each pick on a few things to beat on. But to me, the first one was everything had to be made in America, including the lithium, for an EV in the United States. Well, it turns out we have a lot more lithium than people realized. Georgia has a lot of lithium. So some of that is now being mined and sent over to Salt Lake City, where they have processing facilities that can process the lithium, which is very, very bad for the environment. And California has some pretty good, facility reserves between LA and San Francisco on the eastern border of the state. And we do have stuff in Alaska and a few other places. Canada's got lithium. So getting away from China as the main supplier, which was, the political goal or defense goal, that's achievable. But you have graphite, which no. Now, off the coast of Japan to the east are massive reserves of these rare earth metals, and we don't hear anybody talking about mining that, which would make the most sense. I don't know how many reserves are there, but I'm told it's a massive scale, more than China has. So why that isn't being explored is beyond my comprehension. So here we're trying to build this industry, and alternatives to China haven't really been developed. Great article last weekend in the Wall Street Journal about some efforts being made by an Australian company. But that was not thought out. In fact, the Biden administration seems to be backpedaling on the restriction of getting nothing from China into these cars. Because if you want to make a few cars, yeah, you can say forget China. You want to make as many cars as you need to replace the American fleet of automobiles? Oh, come on.
Well, and then the double, if you backtrack to the whole issue of lack of consumer demand on EV, it relates to the the capacity and the lack of infrastructure, charging stations, and all that. So I mean, we've seen a dramatic drop in consumer demand, right, which could poke the balloon, and then you take a step behind that and say, well, the infrastructure, the grid system, I mean, the country's running out of power to begin with.
Exactly.
And so, it's a very sort of there's no big picture plan, right? It's sort of segmented, a pocket here, a pocket there, and there's no comprehensive plan for EV whatsoever that I can see.
Exactly. So when we look at all of this national defense stuff and the environment stuff, we see some stupid things being done, and maybe a few smart things being done, which is the theme here.
Less stupid, more smart?
Yes, exactly. So let's talk about Kia. They're building a factory here, and I'm pleased with everything I see coming from Kia. And I'm not saying it because it's nearby here, etc. Kia is pricing most of their electric vehicle models in between $20,000 and $30,000.
Yep.
I mean, I would never pay $80,000 for a Tesla. It's a waste for me. There's disutility in an electric vehicle. I would rather buy an ICE for $40,000 to $45,000 because I can, my wife and I can jump in it. We can drive to where our son lives. We can drive, to Houston if we want. That's fine. You get an EV, and all you do is, when you go further than your office or the supermarket, is where can I recharge? I need to know all the recharge places. You end up in a self-help group for people who bought electric cars.
That mental picture is awesome right now.
So I'm not going to pay 80. I'm not going to pay 45. I have to discount off the ICE price, 45, all the disutility, and that takes me down to at most $30,000. Because when I need to go long distance driving, I'm going to have to rent a car. So my normal car had better be very cheap. So I have extra money left so I can rent an ICE when I need it, internal combustion engine when I need it.
Thank you.
So,
we've been punching EV pretty hard.
Wait a second, I want to say one more thing on it that we hadn't discussed ever before. China is making a horrible, horrible structural mistake.
Okay.
It is building up a huge dependency on EVs. They're exporting them to countries all over the world, small amounts to various countries who don't really have the infrastructure for this, and they're making the country dependent on the EV.
It reminds me of their focus on the real estate and construction, and how they pick something and they just roll with it until it comes apart, and then they pick something else.
Yeah, they're blowing up right now with real estate and construction. It's not a good thing.
No.
And by the way, there's no Schadenfreude, from at least from me, and I know not from you, because if China blows up, that crap's going to hit us too.
Yeah.
There is no escaping. China is way too big and important. So, but them going down the EV route is bad because we're all going to have to go to hydrogen.
Yep.
And all that money that's wasted in electric should have been invested in hydrogen infrastructure. Kia is way ahead of the curve, planning for that, working with Georgia Tech.
And
I'm impressed.
I wonder, though, if the shell of a lot of these manufacturing facilities, they've got a sign today that says future home of the EV, while inside they're not preparing for hydrogen, and then one day they're just going to take the EV and future home of hydrogen powered Hyundai.
Erase the E, put an H there. No, that's a really good. I hadn't thought about that.
I mean, it just seems to me that if I'm those guys, I'm taking advantage of whatever incentives you're going to give me. I'm going to save billions of dollars. I'm going to continue to invest. And when we flip the switch in 2 or 3 years, that nobody really cares whether it's electric or hydrogen, as long as it works, as long as people want to buy the product and the workforce, is employed and the overall GDP grows. Nobody really, hydrogen versus electric, nobody cares.
Yeah.
Right?
So you just made a really good point, Mark. The policymakers don't always think it all the way through.
Yeah.
It's the law of unintentional consequences that kicks in. And I have such a wide range of questions about, what are the new problems that arise because we switch to electric vehicles? Every solution brings its own new problems or issues. And I don't see any consideration of it, especially not in California.
Yeah, and I think that the dinner check's on its way. The waiter's bringing it across the room right now.
Yeah.
And I think
what a good way to put that.
The end of 24, I think we're going to be standing around like who's American Express is going in for that one. Nobody wants this one.
Well, all of these different tax plans, et cetera, that get discussed in Washington, and when they originally assessed the IRA, and when would it, help reduce government debt, et cetera. The projections are you wouldn't see any of those effects for about 20 years. So, I think those projections are nonsense.
Yeah.
I think you're right, and I think the dinner bill is going to arrive a lot faster than people expect. So beyond 2024, all right, we covered it, right? We don't want to start talking about the chip factories now, do we?
No. Well, let's circle back on the next one and talk about overall construction spend.
Okay, great.
Hey guys, thanks.
Hey, take care.
It's been good.